way to do it.
Nope. So, who knows? By next week, we might have an update on this.
Yeah.
Though speaking of a bad week for certain people at Disney,
Yes.
so um, begun the Disney layoffs have.
Yes.
One of the things I thought was interesting is so they're talking about firing 7,000 people. And
Mhm.
from the sounds of it, that may not be 7,000 actual fires. It might be like part of it might be done via a hiring freeze.
Mm.
But there's sort of a pattern with it. And it's proving that Bob Iger may not know how to properly bid for Fox, but he is not to be messed with.
Yeah, that's yeah. I really thought that when they brought him back in, that he
Mhm.
was going to be it was just going to be like it was when he was there before, and that has turned out to not be the case.
No.
He's yeah, he's basically doing what Chapek was trying to do.
Yeah, I've made this analogy before, but it's really like that Trotsky pig rolling out his 5-year plan in Animal Farm, getting killed, and then Napoleon, the Stalin pig, coming in and immediately going out, here's my 5-year plan after just picking up
Yeah,
the binder.
yeah,
Uh, because just from a business perspective, some of these cuts were blatantly obvious that they needed to happen.
hmm
Facebook can't make money off the metaverse. Why does Disney need a 50-person metaverse development team?
they don't.
Yep, so they're gone. Um, Victoria Alonso damaged the company in many ways. What a coincidence. She's gone.
Yeah,
Ike Perlmutter tried to help with that proxy fight that we've talked about previously.
yeah.
He is out.
Yeah, and a lot of people have said that they thought he was already gone. Um,
He was on the board. He technically still was a head of Marvel, just that they had taken away his creative control because, among other things, he didn't want to make Black Panther and Captain Marvel movies.
yeah, yeah, and Changa says that his metaverse is still a thing. Kind of,
You,
sort
you,
of.
it would not surprise me if Facebook renames itself back to Facebook
Yeah,
in the near future because like the idea of the metaverse is cool, but just as a how things have actually turned out for it, not so much.
yeah.
Um, and actually, we're seeing some. By the way, for those who don't know, Ike Perlmutter, uh, basically, he was like the head of either the founder or head of Toy Biz, which was part of Marvel in the '90s. Like it was their toy division, and when they
Mhm.
went bankrupt, he ended up in charge of the company. He's always had a reputation as a real jerk and curmudgeon.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I've heard stories that at the Marvel Comics offices, people had to bring their own toilet paper.
Yeah, and they weren't allowed to turn the lights on in their office. They had to use the natural light from outside.
Right. Which, on the one hand, if your company is coming out of bankruptcy, that's reasonable-ish. But on the
Mm.
other hand, oof, that sounds like a really awful work environment.
Yeah, and yeah, you're down to pencils and paper at that point.
Yep. Did you really have to sharpen that pencil? That point was still good. We just wasted some graphite.
Yeah. Oh man.
Um, Now, part of this is possibly was it Nelson Van Pelt? Pelt.
Um, um, yeah, Peltz.
It was
God, yeah, I
one
can't
of the
remember.
things that Peltz got out of Disney when he decided to drop his proxy battle was they're promising to start paying a dividend at the end of the year again.
Mm.
So if you're having to give out money to investors, then this is a sensible move. It's also just a sensible move because they were really freaking overspending on things.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was Nelson Peltz.
Nelson Peltz,
Um,
thank you.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, good lord. Do you really need to spend $200 million on every single Marvel movie and every single Pixar movie?
Yeah, that's hard to make money on when you're spending $1 billion, or when you earn $1 billion. When
Yeah,
you have flop after flop after flop, and even
yeah,
like your wins are like base runs, like possibly Black Panther and Thor were.
yeah, and Doctor Strange too, to an extent.
Doctor Strange 2 is like that's a clear victory of some sort. It's
Yeah,
they probably disappointed didn't make $1 billion because, honestly, like their point of comparison pre-pandemic was, well, we managed to con people into seeing Captain Marvel and it made $1 billion.
yeah,
Black Panther blew the roof off and it made 1.3 billion or
hmm,
something close to that. So I'm sure that they imagined they were making $1 billion
yeah.
for every movie going forward, which
Yeah,
justifies a $200 million production budget.
yeah.
Now, as far as uh, yeah, so Perlmutter, uh, I don't think don't cry for Perlmutter.
No.
He made his money when Disney bought Marvel.
Hmm.
Um, he helped shepherd in the first wave of MCU movies. I think that where he lost his influence was after Age of Ultron, as memory serves, somewhere in there. Um,
Well, wasn't he the guy that said uh, with Iron Man 3
mhm.
that originally Maya Hansen was going to be the villain in Iron Man 3?
Hmm.
And I want to say it was either Perlmutter or somebody else who nixed that idea, saying, "Oh well, an action figure of a female villain doesn't sell."
That sounds like him.
Yeah.
Also, just for everything I've ever heard about how the toy industry works, he was probably right.
Yeah.
That is like that's a thing that is a long-standing observation about the boys action figure market, is that the female characters don't really sell all that well comparatively.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I remember back in the days of Avatar: The Last Airbender, people were complaining, why can't I get a Korra, not a Korra, Katara?
Oh, Katara. Yeah.
Yeah, why can't I get a Katara? And yeah, you're right. They should have been able to get a Katara, but there were practical reasons because boys want to pretend to be Aang for a little bit. It feels for most of them it feels weird to pretend to be a girl for a little bit.
Yeah. Although and yeah, I wonder how, like with Playmates and Ninja Turtles, how many April O'Neil action figures they sold.
That is a good question. I know
Yeah.
that I had one, though I think it was technically my sister's.
I had one, and I think it was just because I was a completionist.
Yeah, right. Like, how often did you really get to? Although I remember, like, I used to do these elaborate. Like, I would go to a friend's house on Saturday, and we would get all of our action figures out. And we'd make these elaborate stories, and it was
Yeah.
always different every time. And April ended up being a good stand-in for, like, we could make up characters to play with our Marvel people if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Uh, we were kind of out there, but
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there.
Mhm.
Um, so, and actually, this over here, this headline that we're not going to click on, to earn profit, Lyft hired a CEO from a nonprofit, which is ironic.
Mhm.
But the fact that it's noteworthy that Lyft is trying to earn profit, there's a lot of businesses that have been living off of venture capital and low interest rates for a long time. So that's why
Yeah.
we're seeing these big rounds of layoffs.
Yes, because venture capital is drying up and interest rates are going up.
Yep, and that's the thing. Like when interest rates were like near zero, it was a totally reasonable thing for a venture capital firm to go, okay, um, we can put $1 million into Vice Media, and at this interest rate, it'll be basically just as good as getting $1 million in 10 years. So might as
Mhm.
well take the bet. Now it's like, well, we could take a risk on this, or we could get a bunch of CDs, or we could get a bunch of T bills or things like that.
Yeah.
So it's not as good of a bet as it used to be.
Yeah.
So in the era of profit, and I saw one I don't have a source for that Clownfish TV is talking about how it's being noticed that a lot of these layoffs are disproportionately affecting um, what people call marginalized communities.
Mm,
Um, Part of it is that, and this is, it's how to put it, when you hire people because of what they are instead of what they can give you, they're the easiest ones to cut, unfortunately.
yeah. Yeah. And I know there are a lot of people were making that allegation with Victoria Alonso, and that's just, of course, that's not the case with her.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, technically, she did bring something to the company early on. They did actually manage to launch, they did manage to launch a cinematic universe. Like she was there on the ground floor. So
yeah.
um, it's just that the good times ended.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about her that I don't think we really talked about was that she technically violated her contract working on a Amazon uh, documentary about Argentina.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
So that so technically they caught her in a breach of contract, but there are brighter legal minds than us out there that you can listen to.
Yeah.
I believe the Monday Midnight's Edge stream had some good analysis of that because you had Script Doctor and Culture Casino, both of who I believe Script Doctor I know like he works in Hollywood. Culture Casino I think he has or he's like worked with some like legal areas before.
Yeah, I think
So,
that's,
so,
yeah,
so
something like that. Yeah.
they had an interesting conversation about well if you seem to have implicit permission and one breach the contract, does that mean that you can't come at her later for this breach?
Mm.
And it's the answer is like all things in law depends on who's arguing and
Yeah.
how and who's listening.
Yeah.
Um, there was I think it might have been a Ricada Law stream where he was talking about how like most laws are written to what they call a reasonable person standard. And somebody asked him in the chat, "What's a reasonable person?" And his reply was, "Man, if you could answer that, you'd have the law totally figured out. And we wouldn't need lawyers."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that about covers that story. So
Mhm.
let's get into our last story of the evening, which is